The topic for tonight's documentary was chosen thanks to the participation of over 3,100 people in the poll back in July. If you wish to participate in the poll for the next documentary, then be sure to stick around until the end of the video. Now, back to our feature presentation. Garden Warfare 2, a game that both myself, as well as hundreds of thousands of players, over the last 7 years, have enjoyed playing countless times with friends, in either achieving victory in back-to-back maps, or just messing about in the backyard, or online with some dumb strategy that somehow works out. It's safe to say that this game has created thousands of memories, from both the content creators of the past, as well as from those who have played, that we will cherish and hold forever within our hearts. All platforms have a fair share of these wonderful experiences. Xbox, PlayStation, and of course, PC. However, there has been a glaring issue that has gotten progressively worse on the PC side of the game. An issue that in recent times has started to completely spiral out of control. An issue that has caused the PC version in recent months to fall to its knees. Lobbies being constantly crashed, users being held as prisoners in lobbies against their will, and the servers being stressed out to the point where no one can ever log in to play, nobody can ever log in to enjoy the game, and no one to log in for the few who are forced to wander across barren wastelands. Tonight, we shall explore the terrors of the PC version, how skids and hackers across the globe have assaulted the servers, and brought the game to its knees, as a game that many used to play and enjoyed, now crumbled and fallen, unable to keep itself steady and running, as we all forced to watch it fade into despair, and suffer from the actions of such malicious people.
If we wish to analyze and properly observe as to how the game ended up in the deteriorated state that it currently sits in, we have to travel back to when the game first initially launched, and figure out how this whole ordeal had begun, how it sunk into the despair and distraught of today, and what efforts have been made in order to either try and stop, or at the minimum, reduce the negative impact that these kinds of players have had on the shooter community. Back when it launched in late February 2016, Garden Warfare 2 launched on 3 separate platforms, those being Xbox, PlayStation, and what we're most interested in, PC. At this time, because the game was brand new, and the tools used to make the game weren't completely understood, the PC version lived on freely and hosted lobbies just the same as Xbox and PlayStation. Lobbies were normal, players kept to the game rules, and overall, the game played out as one would expect. Whilst this period of normalcy was kept in check, with the game getting updates and fixes, the calmness of the lobbies would not last. Over the coming months, players that were tech savvy with the game's engine slowly learned its internal structure, how it ran as a whole, and the critical part, how to modify and inevitably cheat, either using weapons they weren't supposed to, or granting themselves an unfair advantage through either damage or health hacks. One of the earliest recorded cases of this occurring would be in late April of 2016, just barely 2 months after the game had been released. A user by the name of Kevin would upload a video to YouTube documenting what would be one of the first video recorded sightings of someone using unethical mods in online multiplayer. As shown on screen right now, the video documents a player on the enemy team playing as the Infinity Time mech in an online game of Turf Takeover, an environment in which the Infinity mech was clearly not intended to be in, due to its stats only being made with Infinity Time in mind and being far too powerful for players in regular multiplayer to handle and deal with. The video would obtain mass acclaim to over 650,000 views and would be the first time the community was given a proper glimpse at these players. These kinds of players are what we now know today as skids, which for those who are unfamiliar with the term, are players that use mods online in an unethical way, as to either gain an unfair advantage over others, or to just purely disrupt the lobby for their own amusement at the expense of everyone else. The PVZ shooters weren't unfamiliar with them, as some accounts had been documented back in 2014 when Garden Warfare 1 had been released, though as time progressed, the number of reports that there would be for Garden Warfare 2 would far outpace the number of incidents that would happen in the first Garden Warfare. At first, the reports would be few and far between when it came to the general community reporting about people using cheats online, but soon it would end up out of hand and spiraling out of control, with skids starting to flood lobbies on a near daily basis. Reports would come in from people either playing as bosses, unused content, or just using blatant damage hacks from across the globe in order to make the game unplayable, intangible, and overall a not so fun experience for those who were playing the game legitimately. What didn't help in the matter would be that players who were wanting to get involved in this kind of behavior could easily do so. One, because of the plethora of tutorials that were available either on YouTube or various third-party sites through a quick search on Google. Another would be that the Frosty Editor, the program that GW2 uses to run the game, is open source and free to download by anyone without any form of fee, the only restriction being how much experience the user had with Frosty. That's not to say that all the mod showcases uploaded to YouTube or third-party sites were inherently bad. For example, some were as simple as just changing UI or HUD elements to designs of a player's preference, changing textures to custom ones for either weapon skins or characters, or even changing the lighting on skyboxes, either to give maps a new look, or if the map was too bright and was giving strain on the user's eyes, and simply changing the settings on the monitor weren't enough. Though out of the sea of good mods on Showcase, there are the mods that blatantly showcase being able to cheat online and cause misery in online lobbies. Damage hacks, kill auras, etc. This would eventually lead to one of the most infamous mods being shared to the internet that would have a substantial negative impact on the PC servers of the game, where an infamous user by the name of Super Cody would release a video showcasing a boss mod that worked in online multiplayer. The release of this mod would result in a lot more players being impacted by this using mods, especially with them now having to potentially face multiple boss mod users within a single lobby due to the likes of these players. This would continue to evolve into worse and worse situations, from skids learning other tools to enhance their already infuriating capabilities, to them obtaining the tools from leaks to effectively hold entire lobbies hostage by constantly forcing the map rotation, locking the timer, or forcing everyone into different characters entirely. And if they ever were countered, then they would resort to just completely crashing the lobby, decimating it. It would be these recent developments that could actually explain why lobbies in recent times have been experiencing many technical issues and have been having constant issues, such as the save issues back in February of 2023, as well as the now plethora of posts across the community complaining about being unable to log into the game at all, likely pointing to the skids causing immense stress and strain on the servers themselves, though this is entirely up to speculation, since at the time of writing, no concrete proof has been located. The Steam release of the game in May of 2022, whilst it did initially help out with the player count, did also cause server issues by itself, purely due to the high number of players flooding the servers and overloading them, which affected all platforms simultaneously. It's honestly a shame that a game that was once enjoyable on a peaceful afternoon ended up becoming not only a near barren wasteland, but one that was filled with players that either refused to play fairly or just outright held lobbies hostage until either everyone force closed the game or until the skid had enough and just destroyed the lobby themselves if someone dared to try and stop them. It would end up like a vicious cycle where players are either forced into playing with a few lobbies that are free of skids but barely have any players in them, or go into the lobbies that have plenty of activities but are rampant with skids.
In wanting to get an engagement for how the community reacted in response to this situation over the course of several weeks during late 2023, I opened a form for people to fill in as to share their personal experiences with the PC platform, along with any additional information that they can provide. I would like to thank everyone who took the time out of their day in order to provide data for me to analyze, as well as share with the community, for whilst I may not have a substantial impact on this platform, primarily due to my presence being solely on console, I will at least try to showcase what the people of PC have to say, and what they have to share. What you are about to be shown and listened to is data regarding the responses of 414 individuals who have recalled their experiences, exclaim what they believe is right when it comes to use of in-game mods, and how often they have encountered skids in online multiplayer. The form composes of 12 different questions, ranging from how often people encounter skids online to where they believe the boundaries are crossed when it comes to using mods online. Bearing in mind, these results come from several months back, so they will not reflect the light in recent events. With that being said, let's get to the data. Describe what happens during your average match on PC.
On average, I'd say 1 out of every 9 or 10 games is crashed, which equates to about 2 or 3 hours before I experience that sort of problem. I haven't noticed specific people who join and crash them, but when it comes to cheaters in this game, more than often it's people using mods to use strange characters like Baron von Bats or Super Beams. When I find a hacker on a lobby, it becomes unplayable. I instantly leave and find another one. The most common hacks are illegal characters like bosses and lobby crash. Playing a round of turf takeover was almost impossible as a valid game mode because of the script users, cheaters with no skill that used scripts. 80% of time there are, at the very least, cheaters, invincible, using damage hacks, one-shotters, etc. Less often hackers, but still I'd say at least 50% of games I play crash due to hackers. I often join and everything seems normal. It is 1 or 2 games later that I see a player that either uses a boss as a normal character or the pizza chomper. It also happens a lot that everyone on the lobby is transformed into a pizza chomper, either crashing the game or making it unplayable.
Now on to some smaller questions, in regards to what servers people played on. Whilst not exactly a question that directly relates to the skids in question, still provides us with a general grasp on whereabouts these supposed skids are likely to be found. As shown on screen, the vast majority of participants play within either the European or the North American servers of the game, with South America and Asia participants being a significant smaller margin, and Australia having the fewest, at only a total of 15 participants stating that is their primary region. Additionally, when asked about how long participants had played the game, the responses showed that approximately 45% of participants had played for more than 200 hours. Again, not directly relevant, with this issue becoming present as early as 2 months after launch. Some of these people, especially those who have played for over 500 hours, may have been dealing with skids for multiple years on end. Though the next question afterwards does shine a spotlight on just how frequent skids have become within the game. Namely, how often do people encounter skids in online multiplayer? The graph tells an interesting story in how most players only seem to encounter a skid 1 or 2 times per week, or rarely at all, though nearly a third of responses have expressed that they encounter skids almost daily. What causes this discrepancy is not exactly clear, though it could potentially be related to what servers people play in, and likely that skids have more prominent figures in certain regions than others. Now, on to a more critical question. Where do you believe the line is crossed when it comes to mods being used online? This is a question that I anticipated a large discrepancy within the community, since no 2 people share the exact same philosophy on what is deemed right or wrong. What I also expected is that certain aspects of modding are almost always seen as okay due to their lack of an impact. Knocking a few easy ones off the list, using cosmetic mods, UI element mods, or mods that change the visual looks of the game, are all seen as okay, and this makes sense. Outside of visuals, everything plays the exact same. It just looks different. Mods that grant players either millions of coins or access to what is essentially an infinite supply of consumables, whilst seen as slightly unethical, is also often not seen as cheating either, since again, these do not directly affect multiplayer. They only grant the user access to a much higher supply of currency that only they have access to. We then reach a gray area where the sides are 50-50. People that use mods to either play as an extremely weak character such as Brown Coat, or weaken their character stats. Some argued that this is not considered cheating since they are deliberately placing themselves at a disadvantage compared to everyone else. Some however argued that this is cheating, since in the brown coat case, they are still playing as a character that wasn't intended on being playable at all, and that changing damage values artificially does affect the experience for others. Then there are the obvious outliers, the ones that fuck wrong image. Moving on, the boss mods and damage hacks are the obvious outliers, and are what everyone would agree to be considered cheating. The blatant advantages one gets from using a boss, or modifying a weapon's properties to be far greater than what was intended, can greatly impact how a lobby plays, and how players react. Though by far what's rather interesting is that there are a handful of comments where participants have stated that no mods of any kind at all should be allowed online, regardless of what they are. Whether this is either due to them being sick of skids to the point of taking a stand against any and all modding, or just wanting to experience the game purely in vanilla and believing that everyone should do the same, as the developers likely intended. This lines up with the next question, such as how a vast majority of players have had their experience impacted by other players using mods online, to the point where they either have to go and find new lobbies, or just outright stop playing the game. We are going to skip a few questions, mainly since this one in particular, I believe needs a more thorough discussion given its nature. Mainly, what are their thoughts on the community's attempt at making a stand against the skids in the form of using mods such as Skid Be Gone, or tools to directly hunt skids down and force them away. A vast majority take the side of the skid hunters in believing that their actions are right, since they take out the main threat and make the lobbies safe to play again. However, what takes my interest is a small minority of people who in fact state that the community is wrong and that they are overreacting, claiming that the issue is not as bad as people make it out to be. When going through the responses of those who claim the community was overreacting, there was one response in particular that stood out to me amongst the rest. A response that actually makes logical sense and actually can explain why skids have become increasingly advanced in recent years. Here is said response, in full.
Professional modders and skids are in the midst of what I'd like to call a war. The problem is every time one side employs a new method to counteract the opposition, it results in the opposition finding newer, more extreme methods to counteract the previous method. A good example was the release of Skid Be Gone. Previous to the MOD release, the most you could see a skid doing in public matches was running around and using goofy, and albeit dangerous weapons as a bus or something similar, with Skid Be Gone imposing insta-death for anyone playing as an illegal character. It forced the skids to learn how to impose polymorph buffs to all players on a server, transforming them into illegal characters and by extension triggering the insta-death from Skid Be Gone. This warfare in general has placed the most damage on the casual bystanders who just want to have fun playing a game. At first, all they had to deal with was skids, then came the self-titled skid hunters, and after that invincibility buffs, and after that, restriction buff spam, and after that, client crashing, and so on and so on. Each time either side comes up with something new, the player count for PC slowly dwindles. At this point, the best weapon to fight against skids is complacency. If we don't give them any incentive to evolve, then they won't have any reason to evolve.
The rest of the data regarding the form will be made available in the description below for you to look at your own leisure. Feel free to analyze yourself and come up with your own conclusions. This particular incident is one that has affected the PC community the most, and I believe it deserves its own chapter, given the severity of the situation and how much it has affected both players and content creators alike. Now in context, way before the 18th of September incident, a few people within the Frostbite modding server had discovered an exploit that allowed them to effectively shut down skids in a sense, and had no known counter at the time. Now in light of recent events with the update coming to the game in a few weeks' time, I believe it is safe to explain what the exploit effectively does, though if I am proven to be incorrect, then expect this chapter to be removed. To describe it in its simplest form, the exploit revolved around grabbing hold of a player's account name in order to access their character data. What they would then do is essentially overload a character with a lot more XP than natural and make their level become 46. Now this is important, since in the base game, characters technically run from levels 1 to 45, with each level 10 from each promotion not counting, since that's when they're at the maximum. So when a character is mastered under normal circumstances, they are at level 45 and cannot exceed it. Now at first glance, a character being one level over doesn't seem immediately detrimental. It just seems like one level above master, and the game should see it as master level 2, but the problem lies in the fact that when checking a player's rank to see what should be displayed to everyone in a multiplayer lobby, the game was programmed to only expect levels 1 through to 45, since the developers likely never expected that there would be a way for someone to end up outside these boundaries. But when a player joins with a character that is level 46, when the game runs through the check, because it wasn't programmed to deal with a player outside the range, the game doesn't know what to do, and just ends up forcefully disconnecting the player. The player can try as many times as they want to get back in, but because their character characters are a higher than expected level, the game cannot handle them, and thus cannot ever enter multiplayer servers ever again. This exploit was initially kept quiet between a few members of the Frostbite modding servers, in order to slowly but discreetly take down skids one by one, and it had been semi-successful, though eventually, things were not to last. On the 18th of September, an announcement was made to the Frostbite modding server. The exploit had been leaked, and skids had now gotten a hold of the exploit. People were now no longer safe on PC, since the thing is, the exploit worked on anything. Even if you were not currently online, the only requirement for you to be at risk is just owning the game, and skids could just ban you on the spot. What made it even worse was that skids were spreading it across their groups, and so, more and more people would gain access to the tools used to ban people. This was especially problematic if you had any kind of following on the PC platform, such as Fuji for example, as you would just end up being a prime target to be banned. And with videos leaking the tools all around, it was safe to say that the skids had now truly made the game unplayable for anyone, regardless of who you were. Most were upset at being unable to play the game, though some such as Gabriel for example suggested the Frostbite modding server as a whole were at fault for discovering such an exploit that never should have been used in the first place, and that them using it ultimately brought it to the skids' attention and ended up getting it leaked. With such a powerful tool, letting it get into irresponsible hands is definitely something that should be called into question. In regards to how it ended up getting leaked, the bans would continue for multiple weeks, and it began spreading to the likes of the other shooter games as well, with Garden Warfare 1 and even BFN no longer being safe to play either. But luckily, EA happened to notice all the commotion and stepped in with a temporary solution. This solution came in the form of daily unban waves, where they would run a script that would essentially look at players' accounts, and if any character was detected to be higher than level 45, then they would be set back down to level 45. Whilst this wasn't a permanent fix, since you could still be banned, it was a solution that the community was willing to take, if it meant that they could play the game again. Later on down the line, one of the managers had mentioned a potential update on the fix at some point during the early months of 2024, which we will get into towards the end of this documentary. Obviously, due to a lack of intervention on PopCap's behalf up until very recently, the community had to take matters into their own hands and come up with solutions of their own in order to combat against the skids. However, because not everyone was the most tech savvy when it came to modding, many could not come up with solutions themselves. But luckily, two figures within the community, Breakfast Brains 2 and NM Gaming, stepped up and provided the community with a somewhat reliable solution in the form of Skid Be Gone. This mod at the time of its release had critical acclaim and was dubbed as the unofficial anti-cheat for Garden Warfare 2. At the time, the mod, whilst it did have a few minor side effects, such as a few graphical errors and disabling the speed boost in Town Hall game modes, what it provided in return was more than enough that people flocked in the masses to come and download it. Basically, when the mod is active, it does a constant scan at whatever lobby you are in at all times, checking every single player and what weapon they are using. If the mod detects a weapon that's not expected in multiplayer, such as either the weapon of a boss for example, you would be transformed into the pizza delivery chomper, be forced into the sky, and explode to death. This process would repeat over and over constantly until the skid either swapped off their hacked characters or left the lobby. Whilst this didn't pick up damage or health hacks, it did severely tampered with a sizable majority of what skids used in multiplayer, so people were happy to finally be able to play their games and even get to enjoy the aspects of seeing skids suffer in a glorious firework display as a form of additional entertainment free of charge. However, this was not to last, for whilst the mod did offer a semi-reliable anti-cheat, it did come with two major flaws, one of which would seal its fate and make it become next to useless. Due to how the mod constantly runs checks to scan the whole lobby, it puts the server under quite a bit of strain, and as a result, may increase how much latency the player may experience when playing the game. But this is seen as trivial when compared to what would happen to it in the following months. Because the mod followed a set order of instructions and only did general checks, skids would eventually clock onto how the mod worked and essentially hijack the order of instructions. What a skid would do is that if they discover someone running the skid be gone mod in the lobby, instead of just stopping using their hacked characters like normal, they would use one that would end up transforming everyone into the pizza delivery chomper, which the mod would then flag everyone for using a weapon they're not supposed to, which would cause everyone to fly into the sky exploding, being killed in the process. Essentially, skids had managed to reverse engineer the mod to implode on itself by making it so that it would target everyone in the lobby at once. This effectively made the mod a trap if people were unaware, since they would think that skids would be deterred from using mods in lobbies against those that had it, when in actuality, they would be encouraged to use their mods in order to effectively kill off the entire lobby. This would pretty much cause its own creators to discourage the use of the mod, since all the players would be doing is causing more stress than necessary on the servers themselves, which were already being stressed out by said skids constantly crashing the lobbies. So, Skid Be Gone eventually was abandoned, with the few who use it either having no idea of how much damage they're causing, or are fully aware and continue to use it for their own malicious intentions anyway. However, there was another option for people, in the form of a group of players that went by the name of Skid Hunters. As it is implied by the name, would use special modified tools and weapons to effectively harass skids out of lobbies. This was seen as a lot more of an actual direct way to tamper with the skids, since you were facing them head on and getting directly in the way of their path. One of the most popular and well-known former skid hunters as an example would be my good friend Mr. JT, who used to hunt down skids himself, as well as make videos informing people on potential skids and to avoid them accordingly. Whilst this did make some people be considered heroes within the community, it also came with its fair share of problems. Mainly, skids could disguise themselves as one of these skid hunters and effectively give the term a bad reputation by making it look like skid hunters were just abusing their tools for the sake of having advantages over others. The main problem, however, is the fact that sometimes players will see a skid hunter using their tools against a skid and without context will just throw the wild claim of the skid hunter also being a skid themselves. This seems like a rather bold claim for me to make, and it does sound like one, until I discovered something interesting when looking through the poll. The last question in particular happens to ask if anyone recognizes the names of either skids or people who crash lobbies. This doesn't seem relevant at first until I discovered that several responses had stated Mr. JT himself as someone they recognized as a skid. Now, whilst I would obviously disagree with such an accusation given JT's history, from their perspective, it actually makes sense. They might not be aware that a person is specifically hunting down a skid with modified tools, and the skid in question might only be using damage or health hacks, which do not change their visual appearance and make them look like a normal player. Some people have also claimed that being a skid hunter makes you just as bad as the skids themselves, though there isn't any evidence outside of gossip to really prove such a claim. But the fact that now the community were down two potentially great options. One method became invalidated because of skids reverse engineering the mod to implode on itself, and the other method was trashed due to them not only giving it a bad name, but also made the skid hunters look like they were in the wrong. It's effectively like a civil war between the people protecting the game and the skids that want to destroy it. When one side gets an advantage of any kind, the opposition goes and gets an advantage that's more advanced, forcing the two into an arms race of who can one-up each other, and the consequences end up falling onto the general public, and especially the people affected in our next segment. The people most impacted by this arms race are the general public, and especially the content creators. who wish to do nothing more than to simply just play the game and entertain their audience. A game that both had a connection with for years, and they're now pretty much either forced to find alternatives that might not have as much content to offer, or just simply move on to new franchises entirely. I have spent the last few months getting into contact with several content creators on the PC platform, and whilst not everyone has responded, there are a handful of statements a few of these creators would like to share. Their experiences and how their day-to-day lives in playing the game have been outright tampered with and forced to stop due to the skids actions. I shall now present each of their responses, and you can treat them accordingly. Our first statement comes from Sarcastic Bloke, a content creator that in recent times has moved away from Garden Warfare 2 in wanting to pursue different content from other games.
Alright, how have hackers impacted my ability to play the game? It's a bit like a car crash. You're like, okay, that's something I don't see every day, let me have a look at it. Then you look for a bit too long, you see something bad, and you're like, fuck, why was I such a pillock? What did I think I was gonna see, right? And that's what it's like with hackers. You see him in the games, you're like, yo, I want to check out what he's actually doing with the cheats. Then you just get, like, bell flicked into oblivion, and you're like, why didn't I leave sooner? How has it affected content? It's swings and roundabouts. Like, 3 of my top 5 videos are on hackers, but there's a reason why there's only 6 videos in such a well-performing series for me, and that's because most of the time I find them, I just come off the game. Worst experience with hackers are instantly one example comes to mind. I come on to do a video on, like, characters my subs suggested, and literally first lobby I found there was a hacker in. There was no other EU servers when I looked, so I just ended up making a video on finding the hacker. It was whatever. But when I went to re-record it, I found 4 hackers in one day. What happened was I went into a server, started playing, a hacker joined, so I left, joined another one. There was another hacker. Finding a normal server on that day was like trying to find intelligent opinions on Twitter. Highly fucking unlikely. After finding the first 3, I ended up taking a 2-hour break because I thought by that time surely everybody's tired of being a knobhead. It didn't make any difference. I went straight back on. First game, I got crashed out. After the hacker crashed the lobby, I couldn't find any more games. I found that so frustrating. I literally didn't touch PC Garden Warfare 2 for like 2 weeks. I just made videos on the console version of the game using leftover footage or just not playing Garden Warfare. And that's the thing, I think a lot of the hackers think it's just a bit of fun, it's a bit of a laugh, they don't get banned, but you are killing the game. People see hackers in a game too much, they'll just start leaving. Because I make videos on it, it's worth me giving the game another go even when it's been frustrating. But with most people, they're not going to think twice. They're just going to go to another game. I think the worst has got to be when they crash the servers though, because usually they go down for like days afterwards. How many times have the servers gone down this year? I've lost count. That's how bad it's been. At its worst, it was so funny because Vile Hyperion, he put a video up basically saying that the servers were back, and when he uploaded it, he... It's such a joke. The pinned comment was... The pinned comment was, I'm sorry, I know the servers are down again, I pre-recorded this by a day. How bad is that? The servers came back, and because he pre-recorded it a day, they were back down by the time he uploaded it. I know they've got a system in place that automatically bans people for using the dinos online. Couldn't they just do that for bosses as well? Would that really be so hard?
Our second statement comes from Fudge, another content creator that despite the troubling times had continued to persist despite the declining state of the game.
Skids and hackers in Garden Warfare 2 have impacted my ability to play and make content in many different ways. For starters, having to re-record videos has become a very common practice for me just because of the constant cheaters that I'll face whenever I'm trying to record. I usually record around midday, and during this summer everyone was at home. So whenever I would try to record during the midday, I would get a lot more cheaters. And it would lead to me having to re-record the videos over and over and over again, and that became very annoying and tedious very, very quickly. And having to re-record a video over and over again really does impact the quality of the video because you end up having to just say the same things over and over and over again. Another very annoying thing that skids and cheaters will do is crash my live streams. Pretty much any time that I attempt to go live and stream Garden Warfare 2, my lobbies end up getting crashed by hackers. This makes the game literally unplayable for me because anytime that I try to go into the multiplayer portal, my lobby just gets crashed and I get sent back to the backyard. Another small thing I want to note on is having to launch the game with Skid Be Gone. I'm a very big fan of Skid Be Gone. I think that is great for the future of Garden Warfare 2 on PC, but it is a very annoying precaution that we do have to take just because Garden Warfare 2 has no actual anti-cheat on PC. For as long as there's hackers on PC, I will be launching with Skid Be Gone, but I thought I would just note because it is an extra precaution that we now have to take in order to stop or at least like limit the amount of skids that we have in our lobbies. And I would say that the biggest thing that hackers have been able to do to impact my ability to make content on the game is hitting off the EA servers. There has flat out just been like weeks where you cannot play Garden Warfare 2 because the servers have been hit off by hackers. This directly impacts everyone's ability to play and make content on the game because you flat out just cannot play the game. There's only so much single-player content in Garden Warfare 2, and the fact that hackers are just able to take away multiplayer entirely for weeks at a time is just absolutely outrageous, and I'd say that is like the biggest thing that hackers have been able to do in terms of harming the Garden Warfare 2 content scene and the player base overall.
Our third and final statement comes from Mr. JT, who whilst he no longer plays the game or has any interaction with the community, back when he was still around, he had a lot to say and describe with his accounts.
So my experience with skids and PVZ GW2 multiplayer basically goes like this. I'll just be casually playing in a lobby and I'll notice their like a big object tag above, with their player name. And it's clear they're playing as a boss, which is, that's not a thing in GW2 multiplayer. You don't just go in as a boss. Now, there are a fair amount of them who will just play the default boss and run around, but for the most part, you'll see they're like spamming some sort of weapon that'll allow them to kill players quickly, or some of them will spawn a bunch of AI heroes that, they go around and cause mischief. Alright, then we got other ones like the insta-revivers, they'll go around the map and they can instantly revive you from wherever they are, and I think it can be on both teams. Then you got some other kinds of cheaters who do some more dangerous things, like they'll use the soldier file, which if you shoot a character that has the soldier file on, the lobby will crash. Probably because there's no trying to play a hurt sound, but that doesn't exist, so lobby crashes. And so yeah, there are folks who do that, but back to what I was saying about the dangerous things. Just talked about the lobby crashing. There's also client crashing, which is I guess I can say it now since everything is leaked. Actually, I don't really see this that much anymore, but it was a big deal like in 2021 and a little in 2022. If you use that would cause client crash for everyone, so everyone's game wouldn't just boot them to their backyards, it'd cause their entire game to turn off. And then moving on to the round ender. So the round ender is basically they can tap a button and the next map in rotation will load, and they can do that repeatedly to keep players trapped there until they, I guess, all F4 or hit the exit button quickly enough. You have the task manager. Online buffs. Yeah, you can give yourself any buff online by pressing a button, and not just to yourself for that matter. You can spread the buff to everybody in the lobby. I've been in quite a few of those. You just see a bunch of people with toxic overload and all these funny effects on them. The most dramatic part of it is when they spread chomper delivery goat transformation buff to everybody. If Skid Be Gone is being used in that lobby, it punishes everyone. That pretty much sums up buffs online.
All this distraught, caused by people who have nothing better to do, but it seems as if in recent times, this is bound to change. As of just over 2 weeks ago, there was a recent statement made on the official website for Garden Warfare 2, where after several years of radio silence and lack of proper communication, they have finally decided to implement an anti-cheat coming within sometime next month. Whilst many are celebrating in joy at such news, being happy that the game will be free of skids, Some are not as convinced, either because they're not confident that the anti-cheat will even work, or that some people are not a fan of the anti-cheat itself. One of its harshest critics of its implementation comes from Hey I'm Jay, who makes several key points about the anti-cheat in question.
EA's anti-cheat is kind of sketchy. It's at the kernel, which means it's at the root of your computer. So if you want to play any kind of EA game, you are required to give EA full administrative permission to your entire computer so it can scan while you're playing. EA's anti-cheat only supports Windows operating systems, so players that use Linux are not allowed to play. This includes the Steam Deck, which used to support Garden Warfare 2. This means if you had a Steam Deck and you bought Garden Warfare 2 to play it, you can't play it anymore, entirely because of the anti-cheat.
Whether this anti-cheat will finally answer our prayers at the cost of modding, or will all the effort be for nothing? As for now, we do not know, and only time will tell the fate of the game once the update arrives in a few weeks' time. I would like to give a special thanks to Sarcastic Bloke, Fuji, and Mr. JT for all providing statements for this documentary, and for those of you who couldn't deliver on time, that is okay, for I understand that sometimes shit just happens, and life gets in the way. For the next documentary, the topics that are available to select in the poll are: the history of the Gravedigger, exploring the many defunct PVC titles, or the uncertainty of PVZ3. Be sure to head over to the community tab now, for the poll has been started and will be ending in a week's time. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more content like this in the future. I bid you all farewell and good night.